This lesson is on Interfund Transfers. Please turn to your new client handbook to page 61. Well, we spent most of the class, or the last few lessons, I should say, going over your day-to-day transactions, such as purchase orders and payments, and entering receipts, and for some of you, occasionally, investment transfers. Well, now we get to the last few accounting transactions, which for most of you might be rare occurrences, or maybe once a year or every once in a while, a type of thing. And the first one is an interfund cash transfer. And that's located under Accounting Transactions, Interfund Transfer. To clarify, I'm going to first point out what this is not. So if we look at our software, we've got a few things open here, by the way. What this is not is, if we go to Accounting, Maintenance, Appropriation, Budgets, we can see this Reallocate button. And it's very similar to the intra-fund reallocation. This is not within the same fund. If you simply need to move appropriations or budgetary items between one account code and another account code, then you would come to your maintenance section and open up the appropriation budgets here and do a reallocation. And that will allow you to move appropriation budgets, budgetary items between a line item within the same fund. What we're talking about with interfund, as opposed to interfund transfers, are cash transfers between one fund and another fund. So you're crossing funds. So that can be, you're going to need, in some cases, far more authorization for that type of thing than you are with just an intra-fund or a reallocation of your budgetary item within a fund. So, as I've kind of been talking about throughout, at UEN, we're the software people. We're going to tell you what you can do with the software. Whether you can legally do that is another question. We try to enforce some restrictions, general restrictions, but you're going to have to determine whether you're legally or whether it's good accounting practice or principles to record a particular interfund transfer. And so again, you want to, if that's in question, you want to look up as we mentioned in the self-training section, the Auditor State's website, and browse that website for information, maybe your village or township handbook, or the Ohio Supplemental, what's the word? The Ohio Supplemental, I'll just say that, and determine whether it is something that you can do, or the Ohio Revised Code. So let's read through the overview first. Okay, interfund transfers are used to permanently, that's a key word, this is not a temporary loan, but to permanently reallocate money from one fund to another fund, as authorized by the Ohio Revised Code sections. You can look up those sections on the Auditor State's website. Money may be transferred from the general fund, and this is just a generalized statement. Money may be transferred from the general fund to any other fund by resolution approved by the governing board. Generally speaking, there might be some exception to that rule, as far as I know, but in general, most of the time, or in general, you can transfer money from a general fund to any other fund with a board or council resolution. Yeah, not the authority on that, but it's the general idea. Transfers made by any other fund than the general fund, so you're not dealing with the general fund, maybe the street fund or road and bridge, to another fund, require a court order. So you may need a court order for this, unless they are an allowable transfer authorized by the Ohio Revised Code. So again, I don't know. You'll have to look that up if it's a question, if you're not sure. Last sentence. Since interfund transfers permanently change the total fund appropriations, an amended certificate of estimated resources should be obtained from the county auditor. So basically, what you're doing is you're saying, I'm going to take this fund, let's say it's the general fund, and I'm going to spend that money. It's an expense. Even though it's all the same township, I'm going to spend that money from Fund A, and I'm paying Fund B. And so Fund B's revenue is going to increase for the year. And so in that case, you would need an amended certificate of estimated resources to show the revenue change. I mean, I guess the only reason you might not need that if this was something planned at the beginning of the year and it's actually already part of your permanent budget and already accounted for in your amended certificate. Well, perhaps that's a different story, but if this is something that is occurring mid-year or after the amended certificate and permanent resolution, then you or permanent budget, then you're going to need those things in place. All right, so for the software, under the highlights, we've got the requirements as far as what the software requires. It requires these three things. A transfer out appropriation account code must exist in the fund that the cash is being transferred from. Number two, a transfer out account. The transfer out account that the money is coming from should have an unencumbered balance of at least the amount of the cash being transferred. Okay, we'll get back to what that's all about. And number three, a transfers in revenue account must exist in the fund that the cash is being transferred to. And then we have a recommendation. Print a fund status right before and right after posting the transfer to confirm the results. That should be probably sick of hearing me saying that, but this is especially for something like this. It's not a common thing that most people do, you know, week to week or month to month. It's usually maybe a once a year type thing. Print that fund status right before, right after, and then if there's any problem, say with your bank reconciliation, you've got peace of mind of knowing that, hey, it doesn't have to do with this transfer, because I can see, you know, I did what I intended to do using this when I did the transfer based on my fund status report. All right, so I want to show you, I had a few things open here. So the prerequisites, those three prerequisites for doing an interfund transfer, well, you've got to have your revenue account code set up. And so I've already done that ahead of time. I have my transfer in revenue account set up. I've got in the fund, road and bridge fund that I'm going to transfer to. I've got my appropriation account, which is for townships. Here's the transfer out appropriation account code. I've got that activated for my township. And then furthermore, I've got a budget. Under appropriation budgets, I recorded a supplemental in the general fund. That's the account that I'm taking the money from. I already recorded a supplemental for the transfer out and got an appropriation of a total of $2,000 in that transfer out code. We can see that on our reports. On the appropriation status, here's my transfer out account code. I've got it activated for my township, and I've got an appropriation and an unencumbered balance. In other words, I haven't recorded any other cash transfers using this account code, and so I've got $2,000 available. So the most I'm going to be able to transfer from the general fund at this point in time is $2,000 to one or more other funds. Also on the revenue side, you can see that there's my transfer in revenue code, and for this, at least for the minimum requirements, that's all I need. I need to have that account code set up. You might have a budget for it, but the minimum that you need is the account code active in the receiving fund. All right, so where do you go to do this? Well, you go to Accounting, Transactions, Interfund Transfer. Now, if I had not had those three things in place, this would give me an error message when I clicked on Interfund Transfer, but it does not, as you can see. And as you can see, it's a separate pop-up form. Now here I'm violating my own rule, because remember I said before I do this transfer, I want to print a before and after fund status. So let's take a quick look at that. We'll go to Accounting, Reports and Statements, Fund Reports, and click on our fund status and display it. And here I can see my dollar amounts. What I'm really looking at before a transfer is, now this transfer is going to be from the Road and Bridge and the from the general fund to the Road and Bridge, and exercise number 1. So I'm going to, on here I'll probably print this out, and I can write my pen real clearly on here. No, I don't want to do that. I like using these little tools here. In red ink, I'm going to write before, right before I do this transfer. That way I know exactly where I stand beforehand. Hopefully you have better handwriting than me. All right, that's my little entertainment for myself. So far I'll take away the pen. All right, so there's my before fund status, and I've noted the $2 amounts. All right, now back to this form is still open. Go there so you can see it. I'm jumping around, sorry about that. So here's the post interfund transfer form. I got an accounting transactions, interfund transfer, and as you can see, it's a pretty simple form, not too many fields in here. First I want to enter my dollar amount. Well, this is not a realistic amount, but we did it to be kind of safe for the exercise. So we're going to just transfer $1,000 from the general fund to the Road and Bridge. Obviously, it looked like that fund didn't really need that much, just an extra $1,000, but just for example. And then we'll pick today's date, and then the reason, well, more cash needed in Road and Bridge. The real reason you might need to do this is if in your budget at the beginning of the year there were some unexpected expenditures in a particular fund, and maybe you changed your budget and you have some more expenditures. Your entity changed the budget, but you don't have enough cash flow in the current year to meet those expenditures. And it's legally permissible to transfer the money from some other fund where you have more than enough cash. If that's the case, then that would be one example where you may be able to do this. Basically, you're running short in cash and fund, but you do have those expenditures coming up, and then this is legally a viable solution. Then you would. That's why you do this. Obviously, for $1,000, probably not a realistic example here. So optionally, you can put in your board approval date and approval number, and then you've got the from and the to account codes. We've already got them set up, and we only have one of these types of transactions. So when I click on this, it only shows the general fund. That's the one that I have appropriations in, and then the to account code, the revenue code, I have the Road and Bridge, because that's the only account code I have a revenue code set up for. So I select the fund first, there's the general, and then it gives me the appropriation account to select, and there's my transfer out account code with the estimated unencumbered balance displayed, 2,000, more than enough for my transfer of 1,000. And then Road and Bridge, it's got pooled balance, and then there's my transfer in revenue code. And that's really all there is to it. Once you click on this post button, it will move the cash, and we're talking about cash. We're using our appropriation revenue codes, but we're moving cash balances from one fund to another. It's not going to change my estimated primary checking account. Now this cash has to be in the pool, part of the pooled cash for this transfer to work. can't be tied up in a non-pooled investment or something like that. So I'll click on the Post button. It gives me a little confirmation message. It went from 1,000 went from this fund to Road and Bridge. To General to Road and Bridge. And then if I look at it, close the form, it prompts me to print a report, which normally I'd say, yes, go ahead and print that report. That would be good for your audit records. You could also print a copy for your bank reconciliation. So you'd print that, and then you would immediately print your fund status report again. So I'll do that. And now we can see my before. I had 153 in the general fund and 70, just to round, and then 70,000 in Road and Bridge. And now I've got 152 in the general fund in my after fund status, and 71,000 Road and Bridge. So now you've got peace of mind that everything was done as you intended it to do. Notice there's no change in my available primary checking account balance or in my total pooled cash or fund balance, fund cash for all funds. All right, so that's it for cash transfers. The next section, that's again a permanent change. So you would probably end up getting an amended certificate for that, and again a reminder that you want to check in on the legal restrictions for those funds to make sure that to see if you need a court order or not when doing those types of transactions. All right, so the next section is on interfund advances.